Let's say you need to ask for help on a project. It should be pretty simple, right? You just ask someone, "Can you help me?" Or, "Wait, is it could you help me?" Which one of those is right? If you ever find yourself hesitating like this or second guessing yourself, you probably feel a bit frustrated because something that should be simple isn't. And the problem is you've likely learned both of those expressions, but you're not really sure what the difference really is. On top of that, the challenge with this word could in English is that it has a lot of different jobs to do. It's not just about politeness or talking about past abilities. In fact, on top of those two uses, we also use could to suggest ideas, express uncertainty, show hesitation, and talk about regrets. We also use it to give professional opinions. So if no one has ever broken this down for you before, it can feel confusing. But once you see exactly how to use could in all these different ways, it all starts to make sense. And that's exactly what we're going to do together today, step by step, with clear explanations, real life examples, and chances for you to practice with me along the way. So first, let's get started with one of the most common ways we use could in English, which is to make polite requests. For example, just as we started, you could say to someone, "Can you help me with this report?" Or, "Could you help me with this report?" Both are perfectly correct, but using the word could makes it softer and more polite, which is perfect for professional and formal situations, whether you're speaking to a manager, a client, or a stranger. Here are just a few more examples. Could you send me the agenda for tomorrow's meeting? Could I borrow a pen for a moment? Could we reschedule that call for later this week? And if you want to sound even more polite, all you need to do is add please. Could you please send me the agenda? This is perfectly polite, highly professional. This tiny little change between using could instead of can improves your tone and makes you sound more professional. This is particularly important in emails or conversations where you want to build rapport and avoid sounding too direct. So I want you to take a moment right now and consider what is a request you often make in English. Write it down in the comments and use could with that question. And now let's move on to the past. This is where things get a bit confusing and where I sometimes see mistakes. We use could to talk about things we were able to do in the past, particularly skills or abilities you had for a long time. For example, you might hear someone say, when I was younger, I could run 5 miles without stopping. Or she could speak French fluently when she lived in Paris. My grandfather could play the piano beautifully. Here's what's important to know. The word could is not used for one-time events in the past. If something happened just one time, instead of could, we use was able to. For example, here we have an incorrect sentence. I could pass the exam yesterday. It's a one-time event, one achievement, so we want to change that to I was able to pass the exam yesterday. Or another alternative is managed to. I managed to pass the exam yesterday. The reason this is so important is could is for general abilities, while was able to emphasizes a successful effort in a specific moment of time. Another great way to use could in English is to offer suggestions in a polite, open-ended way. For example, when talking with a colleague, you might say, "You could try calling customer support for help," or "We could go out for dinner instead of cooking." You could take the day off if you're feeling exhausted. And if you want to sound even softer when making a suggestion to someone else, you could add maybe or perhaps. For example, maybe you could talk to your manager about it. Or perhaps we could find a solution together. When we use could instead of using should for suggestions, the suggestions feel less pushy or direct, and instead, they feel more open-ended. On top of that, it allows the other person to consider the idea you've provided without feeling pressured. So now it's your turn. Let's take a moment to practice. I want you to think about a suggestion that you recently gave to someone, or perhaps it was a brainstorming solution you wanted to recommend. I want you to write down that example and use could with your suggestion. And now let's move on to the fourth way we use could, which is to talk about things that are possible but not certain. I want you to think about it as a way to say maybe in a sentence. For example, it could rain later today, so take an umbrella. When we say this, it means that maybe it will rain, but we don't really know for sure. Or she could be at home right now, but I'm not sure. This could be a great opportunity for you. In other words, maybe this will help you, or maybe it will be great for your career, but it depends on a variety of factors. So, one great question I hear is how exactly is this different from saying can when talking about possibilities? This is a common struggle, so here's an easy way to remember the difference. Can is for things that are generally true or possible, like dogs can swim. This is true. Dogs have that ability. Or this restaurant can get very busy on the weekends. In other words, it happens regularly. Could is for things that might happen in a specific situation. For example, it could rain later today. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but we're focused on this specific situation or date and time. Or we could be late if we don't leave soon. Again, we're talking about one specific circumstance. So the next time you're talking about specific possibilities, I want you to try using could instead of just saying maybe. Okay, now it's time to take could one step further into hypothetical situations. We often use could in this second conditional form to talk about things that aren't real right now, but they could happen if something else were different. For example, if I had more time, I could learn another language. But the truth is, right now, I don't have more time, so it's not possible or realistic. Here's another example. If we lived closer, we could meet for coffee more often. But again, the truth is, we don't live closer to each other. One more example. If she worked harder, she could get a promotion. But right now, she's not working hard enough for it. Now, if you're someone who loves English grammar and you've studied the second conditional quite a bit, you might be wondering what exactly is the difference between using would and could in conditionals. And here's a quick rule to follow. Would shows certainty or a definite result. For example, if I had more time, I would learn another language. I'm sure I would do it. Could shows possibility or ability, but there's less certainty. If I had more time, I could learn another language. It's an option, but maybe I would do something else. I don't really know. This small difference between would and could changes the entire meaning or the feeling of that sentence. Now, before we move on to the next use of could, I want to share a quick note. If you struggle with the conditional sentences in English, I have multiple lessons that cover the conditionals in depth, including mixed conditionals. So I'll leave a link to my playlist on that topic in the notes below the video. All right, it's time for use number 6. Sometimes we use could when we're not completely sure about something or when we're hesitant to say yes or no. For example, I could go to the party, but I'm not sure yet. In other words, maybe I will, maybe I won't. Or I could say something, but I don't really want to start a debate. In that sentence, you're expressing that you do have an opinion to share, but you're feeling some hesitation about sharing it. One more example. I could help, but I have a lot on my plate right now. So yes, I might be able to, it might be possible for me to help, but I'm not really sure I have the time. In these circumstances, many English speakers use could as a polite way to say no or to avoid making a decision right away. So instead of saying, I don't want to go to the party, which is very direct and it sounds like you're rejecting the invitation, you could say, I could go to the party, but I might just stay in tonight. This softens the response, making it sound more polite. This is particularly useful when you don't want to fully commit to something or when you want to soften that refusal. The truth is, saying no is tough. It's hard to find the right balance between clarity and politeness. Now, if this is something you struggle with, I've got a full lesson on this topic. It's called How to Say No in English Without Feeling Guilty, and I recommend watching it after this video. So I'll leave a link for you in the notes below. Okay, in use number 7, we're going to take a step forward and work on more advanced grammar with a focus on could have, which is what we use to talk about regrets or missed opportunities. For example, I could have studied harder for the test, but the truth is, I didn't, and now I have some regret about it. Or we could have left earlier to avoid traffic, but again, we didn't, and in the end, we got stuck. Or she could have called me, but she forgot. Now, here's something that may be causing some confusion. What exactly is the difference between could have and should have when talking about regrets? Could have means something was possible, but it didn't happen. Whereas should have means that something was the right thing to do, but again, it didn't happen. There's a very subtle but important distinction between those two. For example, I can say I could have studied harder, which means I had the ability, it was possible for me to do it, but I made the choice not to. Whereas I should have studied harder suggests it was the right thing to do, but I didn't, and I regret not doing it. Before we move on, let's go a little bit deeper into this topic. A few years ago, a friend of mine had an incredible opportunity for her career. She was invited to give a presentation at work, something that would have actually helped her get a promotion. But she was so nervous, and she kept thinking, what if I forget what to say? What if I mess up? And in the end, she didn't volunteer to give that presentation. She let the opportunity pass her by. And later she told me, I could have done it, but I didn't. And now I really regret it. That's the power of could have. It means looking back, realizing that you had an opportunity and an ability, but maybe didn't take it at the time. However, there's always a next time. Now, let's compare that to saying, I should have done it. What's the difference there? Could have, again, expresses what was possible. Should have expresses not doing the right thing. So here, I want you to practice for a moment. I want you to think of something from the past week, maybe an opportunity that you missed. Write about it in the comments down below and try using could have. And now let's move on to our final use of could, where we use it in formal professional settings to discuss opinions or analysis in a more thoughtful, careful way. For example, you could say, this could suggest that more research is needed. We're not stating that as a fact. It's really a kind of suggestion or an opinion about what would be the right next step. Here's another example. One could argue that social media has changed the way we communicate. This is a neutral way to present an opinion on a topic that could be controversial. And here's one more example. An alternative solution could be to hire an external consultant. This sounds a bit more professional and much softer than saying we should hire a consultant. When you're speaking in meetings, presentations, or even in emails, using could makes your ideas sound less direct or forceful and more professional and polite. For example, instead of saying, we need to change our marketing strategy, which can sound like a strong command, you could change that to, this data could suggest that we need to adjust our marketing strategy. This is more diplomatic and is open to discussion. Ultimately, this is ideal if you're looking to sound more professional and analytical in work or academic discussions. Now that you have 8 uses of the word could in English, it's your turn to put this into practice. I've got 3 questions I want you to answer, and in each one, I want you to try using could. You can always share with me in the comments. So question number 1, what could you do next weekend? For example, you might say, I could take a short trip to the mountains if the weather's nice. Question number 2, what could your company do to help its employees? Here we're thinking about opportunities, options, opinions. For example, my company could offer more flexible working hours to reduce stress. And number 3, how could AI help improve work-life balance? Again, a very opinion-focused question. You might say something like, AI could schedule meetings more efficiently so employees have more free time. Again, I want you to share your answers in the comments below. You now have a complete overview of how to use could successfully in English. If you found this lesson helpful to you, I would love to know, and you can tell me in a very simple way. Give this lesson a thumbs up here on YouTube, and while you're at it, make sure you subscribe so you never miss one of my Confident English lessons. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.